everyone, my name is Ashley Beeson and welcome back to my channel, and today we are talking spring haute couture because Paris Fashion Week happened last week, and so we are just going to talk about the best collections that walked down the runway. So without further ado, let's just get right into the video. I have selected the 4 best collections from the grouping over Paris Fashion Week. These are just my favorites from what I saw. I did like others. These were just the ones that I liked the best. And we are going to start with Schiaparelli, which was, quite frankly, my favorite collection to walk down the runway for Haute Couture Week. I absolutely loved it. And this collection was called Icarus, which is a testament to the Greek myth of being a story of ambition to fly higher, and Danielle Roseberry channeled that into the fashion for this collection of being more and more haute couture in an haute couture collection. It's always basically just about pushing how haute couture something can be, and I absolutely loved it. And with the connection to the story of Icarus, the notion of wanting to take risks was also something that Roseberry really wanted to kind of challenge the idea of being modern means being simple, and that's not necessarily the case. And so because of that, the aim of the collection was to kind of merge antiquity and modern style into this just encompassing collection, to where it can be modern but it doesn't need to be simple, and it can have a little bit more of that kind of vintage and more antique flair, and it still completely works. And that's what this collection was basically about, and it was fabulous. But because this is Schiaparelli, that also means that surrealism is going to play a part in different ways throughout the collection, because that is a standard of Schiaparelli. And corsetry and kind of just the torso and shapes will also be a center point, because that is also just what Schiaparelli is about, and I love, 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 love. But getting into the antiquity side of the collection, the inspiration was found through couture ribbons that were actually found in an early 20th century box, and he basically just took those ribbons, took those fabrics, and put them into the collection. And these ribbons were actually used in a few of the looks in the collection, namely the last look of the collection, which was made of a length of a brown Moira kind of silk ribbons that were in that box and from that box, with that kind of silkier, kind of shinier, heated almost kind of fabric. That's what that brown fabric is. And then there were also a few other dresses, namely kind of more vertical tiered dresses that had ribbons in it. They were a little bit lighter, a little bit airier, and kind of had a tiny bit of like a flapper energy to it, which is kind of how it moved and how it sat. But those were also used in the kind of antiquity side of the inspiration for this collection. And then on the modern side of the collection, it was basically just all about the shape, whether it be jutting hips in different shapes that are a little bit more futuristic in the sculptural shape, or adding maybe unattainable physical shapes to maybe like the doming or the whatever it is on the shoulders. It was kind of just all about creating not so realistic shapes to the garments, and the shapes of the corseting and the torso could also be part of that modern kind of flair, but it was also adding different fabrics that created different shapes and leveled up maybe what would be a simple silhouette into a more interesting and even more elegant type of shaping that was also used in the collection. And then the boning too was also used in a few different looks to kind of create different lines and different illusions. All of it was basically just taking the main structure of corsetry in the torso and kind of just normal construction of different types of garments that are also, you could consider antique, since corsetry and all that stuff has been around for a very, very long time. But just taking that and leveling it and making it a little bit more modern, but not taking away from the history of that shape. And one of the cool things about these shapes was that Roseberry used a lot of actually older couture techniques to create and develop a lot of these shapes, and the methods were actually utilized by using neoprene and ultra suede to kind of help create that shape. And so some of the shapes that were used were like the 3D peplum. It was like wavy with the kind of like the tulle. That dress was a very good example of using that stiffer to kind of create that shape because it's like floating. And then there's also the kind of one shouldered velvet dress that had stiff flounces that were like up. That was also used, that kind of older couture technique. And then there was also the kind of cream cutaway tail jacket that was also used with that. It was in several looks. Those are kind of just like the main ones that are kind of the most obvious. And it's a really interesting way of doing it. It's not anything crazy. You're still just using something like neoprene, which is still a fabric, so it doesn't have a ton of like construction to it, but it has that visual, and it's just so interesting to look at. And it does kind of give that more modern take to an otherwise super elegant and vintage kind of design. But I think overall the collection, the visuals just across the board were absolutely amazing, and I loved that it was truly a collection of the past, but it was built for the modern world and for the modern client, and I loved it. The collection definitely felt very vintage, but again, it was just elevated with those shapes, and there were definitely surrealism throughout it, whether it was obvious or not. It was definitely there, and I just loved this collection. I loved the variation in the textures of fabric. I loved seeing all of the different shapes. Obviously, I'm a big fan of the corsetry and the boning and just having that shape. I know a lot of people may not love it or they are tired of seeing it, but I love because I just love a shape to a bodice and to a garment. It just is perfect to me. And I thought the illusions that were created with some of the design work was just honestly amazing to look at, and I just loved these looks. No matter how uncomfortable they might have been to wear, they were amazing to look at, and as an haute couture collection, this felt haute couture, and that is exactly what Schiaparelli was supposed to do, and they did it, and I can't really say anything to it. I thought the entire collection was very good, my absolute favorite, and I realistically have no complaints because it was perfect. Next is the Miss Sohee collection, and she's a newer designer. She's only been around for a few years, so she is definitely very much a designer to watch. I discovered her last year, and I am just like, oh my goodness. What I've seen of her is absolutely amazing, and part of the reasons to why she is like someone people need to watch. But as for this collection, this spring collection, it was amazing. Quite frankly. The inspiration for this collection is modern and classic art, and then reimagining the balance between structure and fluidity, and then the balance between modesty and sensuality, and then the balance between tradition and innovation. And it was amazing to look at. Absolutely amazing. The collection was basically like a love letter to craftsmanship, culture, and the female form, and you can actually very clearly see that throughout the entire collection, whether it be kind of just the construction of all of them and how expensive these looks were, and to the culture with the Korean aspect of things, since Miss Sohee is obviously of Korean heritage, and then the female form is something that Sohee Park actually really focuses on, because she is someone that very much focuses in on the body's natural curves and designing for women and making sure that women are comfortable and all of these things that she does. And so that female form was again very prominent in this collection, and there were tons of different things. There were several kind of prominent motifs like petals and shells. There was a lot of floral notes through a lot of the looks, and then there were a lot of shell looks where shell motifs either super obvious or it takes a little bit more to figure it out, but it's all there, and those were kind of the most prominent things. There were a lot of voluminous handbag skirts, and then there were intricate pearl inlays and lots of different things too, lots of different embellishments. It was just a very stunning collection. And then for like the themes of it, it was basically just that culmination of glamour and seduction. That was kind of just the navigation, especially with like the first look with being that lacy look, and then you kind of just have more pieces that are a little bit more sexy, and then you have them that are a little bit more glamorous, and then you got some that are kind of both. Those were definitely very prominent themes. The color palette was very spring. There were lots of blacks and kind of some more neutrals, but it definitely had those spring colors, even if they might have been maybe a little bit more muted in some ways. They were still very springy to me. And then as for like the makeup of the collection, silks and taffetas were very prominent, and then corsetry was there. There were some petticoat type looks there, and then exposed brassieres was also very much kind of throughout the looks. But the main focal points realistically were those like embellishments from lots of different things, whether they're like the shell types of motifs or the floral motifs in the petals. Flora and fauna was very much a prominent aspect of this collection, which pulls in the Korean heritage with those depictions of those flowers. The entire collection was kind of a mixture of flamboyancy and theatrics. If you look at some of them, like the one with the shell behind or the shell parts down below, I'm not sure what they're called, they're kind of on the hip, or the like sculpted bodice that was over it. Anything that was a little bit more dramatic was definitely that more flamboyant side, but there was also kind of that pulling in of the very sensual femininity of the designs, which are like the more simple dresses or the more elegant looking dresses, and they're a little bit understated but still very female and very feminine, and still gives that little edge to them. And with the kind of the mixture of that theatric and then the femininity, it was basically just to mush Western contemporary style with kind of the more delicate Eastern grace energy, and I think it was done very well because I see it. But like overall, this collection was stunning. I loved the fabrics. I loved some of the detail work. The long kind of jackets with the tons of embroideries on it were amazing. The dress, like everything about it was all really pretty, but the looks that had those extra super heavy embroidered and embellished kind of like coat jacket things were leveled up from it, because those things made the dresses. But I really I think there was only one look in the entire collection that I just didn't love, and it was like the shorts one, but everything else had something that I liked, and it was just so creative. And I love that the colors were springy, because there were a lot of collections that weren't necessarily spring colors, they weren't like overly colorful, but I liked that there was still like the blacks and maybe like the whites or the kind of in betweens of those, but there was still those bright bold colors, and I loved it. And I just loved this collection. I thought it was so pretty, and the just detail work and the shapes of all of it was perfection, to me at least. And then we have Elie Saab next. And I am always excited for a collection from Elie Saab because they're always so pretty, and this is no different. This particular collection was a lot lighter and a little bit more polished, because the concept of the collection was definitely motivated by creating a sense of happiness and positivity and hope and humanity, because it was following difficult times in Elie Saab's native city of Beirut. So he wanted to kind of translate the opposition and have hope and happiness rather than the difficulties that were happening. And so that's where the much lighter and just more polished and just happier collection kind of came from. And the design aesthetic of having grace and romance throughout the entire collection was used with the use of flowers as applique, and the flowers were used in dresses and shawls and kind of in sequin dresses to add a little bit more, embroidered into capes and woven into very delicate patterns that are encrusted into the lace. So the floral motif was very much the most prominent, and it was just used in a lot of different ways throughout the entire collection. And along with the appliques that the florals were represented in, there were also some fluted gowns that had feathery petals added to it, which were much lighter fabrics, and they were draped into kind of lighter and more ethereal shapes. And so there's another aspect of flowers being pulled in without it being appliques and things being embroidered into it. And then to contrast those kind of drapier and lighter dresses, there were column dresses that were used that were more to sculpt the body, so it has the kind of more structured side of those garments, and then there were the draping side, so there was good mesh of both. And right in the middle of the collection is I believe it's the only black dress in the entire collection, and it was this dramatic black mermaid dress that was honestly amazing to look at. It was very pretty. And then the collection ended outside of the wedding gown that always ends the collection. The ending little segment of the collection were pieces of dark denim that were all gowns. I think there might have been a pant look, but they were such an interesting contrast because they were a dark denim and they were still some of the same shapes as some of the earlier draped gowns. And I liked seeing kind of all of these springy kind of muted colors with the black kind of in the middle, and then you continue those muted colors, and then you get to the end and there's just this dark denim, and then the last, like the wedding gown as the last look. It was very interesting to look at. And then the overall color palette for the collection were pale pinks, kind of like yellow, green, mustardy colors, that dark blue denim, and then there were variations of blues and kind of more neutral tones throughout it. So it was a very spring forward collection. They were just much more muted in terms of the color hues, except for kind of that yellow, green, mustardy color. That's kind of the brightest color of the collection. But as an overall to this collection, it was amazing. It was quite big. I think it was almost 60 looks. That's a lot of looks, especially for a bunch of gowns. That's a lot. I thought the draping was the best part, and then all of the detail work with adding those petals, whether they're the kind of the feathery petals or having all of the embroidery and the kind of sparkling embellishments with the florals. It was amazing. I loved some of the looks that had the capes and all of the more dramatic looks, but I also liked some of the simple looks, and I liked just the sparkle, and I liked the variety, and there was just so much to it. I loved the contrast of having those simple drape looks that didn't have any embellishment. They were purely just on the draping and the shaping, and then I loved having those looks contrast to the extra like sparkly, embellished, dramatic looks. They were good to kind of have the simple, have the drama, have the simple, have the drama. It was a really good way to break up the collection a bit. And again, that like the black dress was a really good kind of like maybe palette cleanser before you went into it again, because there were so many looks, and the shape was also just very good anyways. And then I loved the ending denim because it was just such a good break in color, and then having that last wedding gown was perfect, and I just loved the collection. It was very well done. Again, a very like, it felt very haute couture, which means they achieved what they needed to achieve, and I have nothing really to complain about with this collection. It was just so well done, so pretty, and the glamour and elegance that was wanted was achieved, and it was great. And then my last collection is the Ashi Studio collection. The collection itself was a reflection of a portion of Parisian history tied to the boudoir and the bourgeoisie that were very tied to Parisian history. And Madame Claude was used as reference for this collection, and she was a famous French brothel keeper back in the 60s, but she was used as an inspiration for what she represented and not for moral or visual guidance. So what she kind of represented was the French, the sensual, and the bourgeois. So with that inspiration, the collection opened up with several lingerie inspired looks that were basically to be used as showing Ashi's hand in corsetry. And then from there, things moved into more extravagant and overt silhouettes. But there were also some more kind of like simple gowns that would be more appropriate for the clientele, like some column dresses or more tailored types of looks. So there were the kind of more extravagant haute couture looks, but then there were also the looks that are still haute couture, but they're just more wearable. And obviously that's important when you still have clients that you need to please. You can have the drama ones, but then you need the little bit more wearable ones. And then throughout the collection, there were a few looks that had like little dogs with them, and those dogs were all handmade and embellished with matching fabrics to the looks that they were a part of. So the little dogs were the same as they were mostly coats, so they basically blended in and it was like all one look. And the colors were also linked to the owner through the jewelry or the brooches. So whatever kind of jewelry the model was wearing, the dog kind of had something similar to tie it all together. So not only just like the fabric was the same, but the embellishments were also the same. And then the color palette of this collection was generally pretty dark. There were only a few, like there was a bright blue dress, and then the rest were on the dark sides. For the most part, there were some lighter neutrals, lots of blacks, lots of darker tones, lots of darker greens. It was a very cool and darker collection for a spring collection, but I didn't hate it because there was still color. It just wasn't bright and vibrant, but I couldn't complain about the colors. I think overall the collection was another that had shapes and drama to it, and I really liked it. The coats and the dog looks, I thought the dogs were kind of funny, but I loved the coats, the big giant dramatic fluff things. I just really loved them. And I thought the dogs were kind of funny, but I liked that they made sure that the dog was just like a little miniature version of whatever was being worn. My favorite looks of the collection was the red column dress. It was amazing. Like a velvet fabric. The color was amazing. The fit was amazing. I just loved it. And then I love it looks like a brown velvet look with the dress, and then there was a big kind of puffy over thing that was being used, kind of like a cover. I loved that. There was also like some embellishments on there. I loved that one. And then I loved the blue look. I loved the color. I loved the shape. I loved the little gloves. That one was really good as well. And then the kind of, it looked black and gold. There might have been some more neutrals in there, but I loved that dress with the kind of more opened and rounded neckline and just like the shape of it. It was so pretty and I absolutely loved it. I think realistically the embellishments across the board were really good and super interesting to look at, and they were all pretty regardless of the fact that I maybe didn't love some of them. The kind of the big black and green look, I didn't love. That one's not really realistic. You probably can't really wear that. I mean, the dress, the look itself, the top looked like a little bralette type thing, and then it was just this big round skirt thing. The visual was really interesting. I just didn't really love the look, but it's not a very wearable one anyways, but it was interesting, and I loved the green. I loved the detail of the green, and it was cool, just not great for me at least. And I would say that the more lingerie driven looks to me were kind of the weakest, but they were still good. I just really loved the big coats, and then the looks that had more drama, had more embellishments to it, had a little bit more shape, and just were overall more interesting to look at. Those ones were the ones that I liked the most. But this collection did feel very couture, and again, that's a good thing, and I was happy with the collection as a whole. One of my favorites, and I would definitely love to like wear some of these gowns because they're so pretty. But Ashi Studios did a very good job with this spring haute couture, and I really liked it, and I want some of it. And that is the end of my Paris Spring Haute Couture Fashion Week review. These were my favorite 4 collections. I just loved the color, the storytelling, the craftsmanship, everything about it. I love that they were all different. They all felt so different with their own inspirations, and these were just my absolute favorites. I did like some of the other collections that were shown, and I also didn't like some of them as well, but these ones were my favorite, and these are the ones that I wanted to talk about. But I would love to hear what your thoughts were on the week as a whole. Were there collections that you absolutely loved? Were there collections that you didn't really vibe with? I would love to hear, so drop a comment down below. But this is the end of the video, so thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.